Hi there, everyone. Miss Hart here. Today we're going to be discussing how the Protestant Reformation changed Europe forever. Historians really, a lot of historians really believe that the Reformation is one of the most significant turning points in European history. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time on it in class talking about how it changed Europe and the impact that those changes has. But before we get into all that, I'd like you to pause this video for a second and go grab your notebook if you haven't already. I'd really like you to take notes on this for class. All right, then, let's get started. Most people make the mistake of thinking that the Protestant Reformation was solely about religion and that its effects were primarily religious. For example, people always talk about how it was caused by reformers like Martin Luther and their criticism of church practices like nepotism and the sale of indulgences, which really to fund their lavish spending habits. And, of course, how this resulted in the creation and popularity of new religions like Lutheranism, Anglicanism, and Calvinism. And while this is certainly accurate, it doesn't give really the complete picture of the Reformation, nor does it really fully capture the complexity of this turning point in European history. Not only did the Reformation change religious practices in Europe forever, but it also altered social life and political institutions immensely. First, let's take a look about how the Reformation changes social life and how this impacts women, peasants, workers, and really minority groups in Europe. Reform movements like the Reformation usually attract those in society who are not part of the status quo. Elites, i.e. those traditionally in positions of power and influence, do not tend to like reform. Why would you want changes if you're the person in power? That's right, you wouldn't. You'd want to keep things the same and do everything you can to prevent any reforms. That's why the biggest supporters of the Reformation were peasants, workers, ethnic minorities, and women. These groups were not part of the status quo and were really looking to change things. And change things they did, although it's not as much as many of them wanted. As a result of the Protestant Reformation, family was really placed at the center of social life. The celibacy requirements for priesthood were abolished amongst Protestant sects, of course. And many former clergy like Luther married and actually had families. The Reformation also spurs on education and really encourages literacy for both boys and girls. Literacy was necessary for religious education and reading the Bible, both of which Protestants encouraged. Now, when it comes to social and gender hierarchies, the results are mixed. Radical Protestant reformers sometimes called for social as well as religious change, a message which really resonated with the downtrodden and oppressed. The German peasantry in particular were really struggling in the early 16th century due to a series of crop failures. Peasants were also really angered by nobles seizing village common lands, changes in rent, and generally kind of like these nobles taking whatever they wanted from the peasants, that sort of attitude. And then there is nothing that will anger a farmer more than taking his prize pig or cow away. That's their livelihood, and that's how they feed their families. The peasants end up making demands based on their interpretation of the scriptures, citing the writings of Luther and other reformers as supporting evidence. This does not really go over very well. Luther did not really support such quote-unquote radical ideas and wanted to prevent rebellion. In his mind, freedom from the tyranny of the Roman Catholic Church did not mean opposition to long-established secular powers, i.e. the government. As a result, the nobility crushes the German peasants' revolt, killing more than 70,000 peasants in 1525. As for women, the Reformation brings some minor changes, although it certainly doesn't challenge the patriarchy in a substantial way. The Protestant Reformation emphasized this whole idea of a companionate marriage and the idea of a wife as a helpmate. Men were encouraged to treat their wives kindly and considerately, although there should be absolutely no doubt at the time who was the head of the family, the husband. And although divorce was now allowed in Protestant religions, it was so rare that it really doesn't have a substantial impact on women. So all in all, the status of women doesn't really change too much as the result of the Reformation, although there was certainly a lot of discussion amongst Protestants about kind of like the role of women in religion. Some women in the 16th century also kind of used Luther's, quote, a priesthood of all believers, end quote, to really advocate for a greater role for women in their religion. But again, this wasn't enough to change the well-established Renaissance view of women as wives and mothers whose sphere of life was limited to the home. So when it comes to changes to the gender and social hierarchies, the Protestant Reformation is pretty underwhelming. Although a few Protestant reformers argued for more social and gender equality, as a rule, most advocated for a continuation, not a change, of traditional gender and social hierarchies, preventing peasants, poor workers, and women from seeing any real change in their social status or power. The next big change that results from the Protestant Reformation is going to be a change to social institutions, particularly religious institutions like the Roman Catholic Church. Obviously, Europe transforms from a society dominated by the Roman Catholic Church to a more pluralistic society in which many sects of Christianity are practiced. And how is the Roman Catholic Church going to react to this challenge to their power? Well, first they institute some key reforms, because, Luther made some good points. And then they attempted to revive Catholicism through the Inquisition and the arts. Even before Luther opposed the 95 Thesis, many Catholics recognized the need for reform. This reform movement continues during and after the Reformation. The Catholic Church finally, in 1563, makes some key changes, although not as many as some reformers had hoped. The Council of Trent finally eliminates many church abuses and provided for the better education and regulation of priests. The Council of Trent, however, absolutely refused to change key Catholic doctrines, including celibacy for priests, an emphasis on salvation through good works, the authority of the papacy, and transubstantiation. So even though there were some changes, the Catholic Reformation saw a lot more continuities than changes. In order to bring believers back into the fold, so to speak, the Roman Catholic Church used both positive and negative reinforcements. Like, in order to encourage you to continue to do your homework every night, I'll both give a reward, like a really flattering comment on top of your paper, or like a punishment, a deduction in points. The Roman Catholic Church basically does the same thing in response to the growing popularity of Reformation ideas. First, the negative reinforcement. The Roman Catholic Church implements something called the Inquisition, which was really designed to root out heresy. Basically, anyone who questions church teachings or was attempting to practice other faiths is going to run afoul of this Inquisition. This really has a negative impact on intellectual life in Italy especially. Case in point, Galileo, one of the most brilliant scientists to ever walk the earth. When Galileo publishes his book, which was spread via the printing press, of course, promoting the heliocentric theory of the solar system, this is a big problem because it contradicts Roman Catholic Church teachings. He was then tried for heresy and placed under house arrest. Interesting fun fact here, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't actually admit that Galileo was wrong and clear him of all charges until 1992. In fact, Galileo's books make it onto the Roman Catholic Church's index of prohibited books, which is another way that they were trying to kind of curtail some of these heresies. The Roman Catholic Church realized that they had to clamp down on any printed material that threatened to mislead the faithful away from their teachings. Although this has a limited impact on Protestants, obviously Protestants aren't going to be listening to the Roman Catholic Church at this point, the list of prohibited books continues until the 20th century. Now, before you start to think that the Roman Catholic Church was all stick and no carrot, well, it wasn't. The Roman Catholic Church sponsors arts and musicians to create art in an effort to revive Catholic spirituality. You see, they realized that art and music was a way into people's hearts, and the Roman Catholic Church really wanted to get into to touch people's emotions. This movement was called Baroque art. Baroque art really emphasizes grandeur, illusion, and dramatic kind of religious feelings. In short, it was over the top and emotional. Here we can kind of see 3 different examples of Baroque art from the period, from really the Catholic Reformation. First, we have here on the left, Bernini, sculpture of the Effigy of Saint Teresa. Then in the middle, we see Caravaggio, who is depicting kind of Jesus's entombment after he was crucified and died. And then here on the left, or on the far right, we see Susanna, a story of Susanna being kind of harassed by a very pious wife who was harassed by some of her community elders. It's a pretty well-known Bible story. The point I'm trying to make is you can kind of see here when you look at all these, the clear emotion portrayed. And this was really designed to kind of get in touch with people's emotions and kind of like stir up their feelings of spirituality and faith. The idea behind it is this is going to bring people back to the Roman Catholic faith. In addition to the immense social changes that the Reformation brought, there were also significant political changes. As a result of the Reformation, Europe really experiences religious, economic, and social or political turmoil. First and foremost, the Reformation leads to a lot of conflict as people fight over which religion to practice in which region. England and France are going to experience wars of religion. You can see here Henry VIII's Act of Supremacy. He creates like a new kind of church, the Anglican Church, of which he as the monarch is going to be the head. And then, of course, we have here depicted the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of the French Protestants, who are called Huguenots, in 1572 in France. These are just 2 examples of like the wars of religion that are going to be fought over the course of really the 100+ years after the Reformation. In addition to kind of the wars of religion in England and France, there's also really a huge conflict in the Holy Roman Empire as well. We're going to see the 30 Years' War, which is going to last, you guessed it, 30 years. It was really going to kind of tear apart the Holy Roman Empire. Really, when all is said and done in 1648, 20% of German people had died in this war, and up to 50% of Bohemians died, really trying to win this war. The thing to kind of remember about the Holy Roman War is it ends in 1648. Sorry, the 30 Years' War is it ends in 1648. It lasts 30 years, and really no one ever kind of like won it. So kind of very destructive, a huge loss in life. This is going to kind of recreate and remake Europe in a lot of different ways. In order to deal with these crises, these wars, European rulers were able to increase their power, arguing that God gave them the right to do so. In fact, Catholic monarchs in the 17th century are going to claim divine right to make their rule over their subjects legitimate, helping them become more centralized absolute monarchs. And that's really all going to go as a result of it's all going to happen as a result of the Protestant Reformation. Well, that's about all I have for today. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how the Reformation is a major turning point in European history. Make sure you let me know in class the next time I see you if you have any questions or if there's anything you don't understand. Until next time.